disciples and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? See, the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand." While Jesus was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12 disciples, arrived. With him was a large crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests and elders of the people. Now the betrayer had given them a sign saying, "The one I kiss is the man, arrest him." At once he came up to Jesus and said, "Greeting, Rabbi," and kissed him. Jesus said to him, "Friend, do what you are here to do." Then they came and laid hands on Jesus and arrested him. Suddenly, one of those with Jesus put his hand on his sword, drew it, and struck the slave of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Then Jesus said to him, "Put your sword back into its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Do you not think that I cannot appeal to my Father, and he will at once send more than 12 legions of angels? But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled which say it must happen this way?" At that hour Jesus said to the crowds, "Have you come out with swords and clubs to arrest me as though I were a bandit? Day after day I sat in the temple teaching, and you did not arrest me. But all this has taken place so that the scriptures of the prophets may be fulfilled." Then all the disciples deserted Jesus and fled.
Those who had arrested Jesus took him to Caiaphas, the high priest, in whose house the scribes and elders had gathered. But Peter was following him at a distance, as far as the courtyards of the high priest. And going inside, he sat with the guards in order to see how this would end. Now the chief priest and the whole council were looking for false testimony against Jesus so that they might put him to death, but they found none, though many false witnesses came forward. At last, 2 came forward, and one of them pointed at Jesus and said, "This man, Jesus, said these exact words, 'I am able to destroy the temple of God and to build it back in 3 days.'" The high priest stood up and said, "Have you no answer? What is it that they testify you for? Speak up." But Jesus was silent. So the high priest said to him, "I put you under oath before the living God. Tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God." And Jesus said to him, "You have said so. But I tell you, the next time you see me, you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven." And then the high priest tore at his clothes and said, "He has blasphemed. Why do we still need witnesses? You have heard his blasphemy. What is your verdict?" And they answered, "He deserves death, death, death." And then they spat in Jesus' face and struck him, and some slapped him, saying, "Prophesy to us now, Messiah. Who is that just struck you?"
When morning came, all the chief priests and the elders of the people conferred together against Jesus in order to bring about his death. They bound him, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate the governor. Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, "Are you king of the Jews?" Jesus said, "You say so." But when he was accused by the chief priests and the elders, he did not answer. And then Pilate said to him, "Do you not hear how many accusations they make against you?" Jesus gave him no answer, not even to a single charge, so that the governor was greatly amazed. Now at the festival of the Passover, the governor was accustomed to release a prisoner for the crowd, any one they wanted. And at that time, they had a notorious prisoner called Jesus Barabbas. So after the crowd gathered, Pilate said to them, "Whom do you want me to release to you? Jesus Barabbas, or Jesus who is called the Messiah?" For he realized that it was out of jealousy that they had handed him over. While Pilate was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent him word to him, "Have nothing to do with this innocent man, for today I have suffered a great deal because of a dream about him." The chief priest and the elders persuaded the crowds to ask for Barabbas and to have Jesus killed. The governor again said to them, "Which of these two do you want me to release?" And they said, "Barabbas." Pilate then said to them, "Then what should I do with Jesus, who is called the Messiah?" And all of them said, "Let him be crucified." Then he asked, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Let him be crucified." So when Pilate saw that he could do nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning, he took some water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, "I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves." Then the people as a whole answered, "His blood be on us and on our children." So he released Barabbas to them. And after flogging Jesus, he handed him over to be crucified.
Then some soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the governor's palace, to the praetorium where they trained, and they gathered the whole company around him. They stripped Jesus of his clothes and put a scarlet robe on him, and after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on his head. They put a reed in his right hand as a scepter and knelt before him and mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" They spat on him, and they took the reed and they beat him on the head. When they had finished mocking him, they stripped him of the robe and put his own clothes back on him. Then they led him away to crucify him. As they went out, they came upon a man from Cyrene named Simon, and the soldiers forced him to carry Jesus' cross. When they came to a place called Golgotha, which means place of the skull, they offered him bitter wine to drink mixed with gall, but he tasted it. He would not drink it. Again, they took his clothes and they nailed him. When they had raised him up and crucified him, they divided his clothes among themselves by casting lots. Then they sat down to keep watch over him. Over his head they put a charge against him, which read, "This is Jesus, King of the Jews." Then two criminals were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by deriding him, shaking their heads and saying, "You who would destroy the temple and build it up again in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross." In the same way, the chief priests also, along with the scribes and elders, were mocking him, saying, "He saved others, he cannot save himself. He is the King of Israel. Let him come down from the cross now, and we will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God deliver him now, if he wants to. For he said, 'I am God's Son.'" Even the bandits who were crucified with Jesus also taunted him in the same way. Were you there? Did you dig the hole, or hammer the nail, or raise the cross? Are you among the passers-by who glance, then look down, and hoping not to get involved? Or are you among those who sit in fear and grief and who wait for the next chapter?
the triumphant entry of Jesus into Jerusalem? Were you there to behold our King, the Word of God made flesh? Were you there with the one who comes to deliver us from our deaths by his death and resurrection? Were you there? Please stand.